The greenhouse sat deep within the overgrown corner of the Hawthorne estate, its skeletal iron frame obscured by decades of creeping ivy and neglect. During daylight, it was merely a ruined relic, its glass panes shattered or filmed over with mildew, casting fractured light across rusted gardening tools and dead soil. But at night, from her bedroom window, Clara noticed something strange: how the moonlight never touched it properly, how its structure seemed sharpened against the dark, as though it twisted ever so slightly in the periphery of vision. Her grandmother, in the drawl of old age crossing into dementia, often warned her not to venture into it after sunset. "It's not emptiness in there," she muttered once, stirring her tea with the same spoon she used to turn soil decades ago. "It's remembering." After her grandmother passed, Clara took to exploring the property with a growing sense of nostalgia and unease. The greenhouse always drew her back. One late afternoon, unable to suppress the pull any longer, Clara slipped through its open door, careful not to breathe too heavily through the mold-fogged air. The interior stank of rot and the iron shelves were brittle to the touch, but the plants, dead long ago, seemed strangely arranged, as though someone had swept through, disrupting the dust and setting things in patterns that defied their purpose. Pots faced inward in a spiral, vines, severed and dry, lay in perfect rings on the ground. And at the center, a patch of soil darker than the rest, as though watered recently, despite the absence of a single drop of rain. She began waking up at night to the sound of metal creaking, a slow whining she initially blamed on the wind. But it was always rhythmic, almost methodical, like something shifting weight with intention. She counted the seconds between creaks, timed how long each lasted. 13 seconds pause, each time. And then, something even stranger. The scent of jasmine, sharp and cloying, began to follow her indoors, seeping under doors and through vents, strongest near her bedroom closet. Clara was no stranger to isolation, but something about that smell, so firmly out of place in the season, made her feel watched. Not in the typical, rational way one might feel while being observed by a person, but in the way one might sense a memory itself had teeth. Eventually, she returned to the greenhouse at night. One part defiance, one part irresistible pull. Guided by a restless obsession, she wanted to face the thing that made her grandmother lock all the garden doors each evening at sundown. When she entered, the door clicked softly shut behind her, though she hadn't touched it. Silence, at first, then the groan of metal. But this time, it was coming from beneath the soil. Clara stood frozen as a breath of warm air passed near her ear, curling her hair against her cheek, though the windows were too dirty for wind. The dirt patch at the center began to bulge ever so slightly, not break, just heave, as though breathing from below. Clara turned to run but found the pathway lined on either side with neat rows of flowering plants she knew hadn't been there before, blooming violently in full color. Days bled strangely into one another after that night. Clara stopped checking her phone, then stopped noticing the time altogether. She wandered through the house without purpose, except to check the greenhouse windows again and again, always seeing her own reflection until she'd turn too quickly, and see it move just a beat too slow. Her reflection no longer smiled when she did. At times, it frowned. The soil on her hands never fully washed away. Her dreams took the texture of wet leaves and glass cuts, and always ended in the greenhouse, where the central patch of dirt whispered in voices identical to her grandmother's but speaking in unknown tongues. She caught herself muttering those sounds in daylight, unconsciously humming a tune she didn't remember learning. One evening, storm clouds blotting the sky into a bruise, Clara walked into the greenhouse barefoot, trailing a line of petals from the house. The plants parted before her, opening a narrow aisle straight to the center, where the soil patch shimmered with unnatural light. Something called her name, not in sound, but in sensation, a pull in her chest, in her teeth. She knelt and plunged her hands into the soil. It welcomed her. The ground gave way too easily, warm and wet, drawing her fingers deeper, then her wrists. Her elbows. Something wrapped around her arms from below, soft as roots yet undeniably alive. Then, from behind her, without a single pane of glass shifting, a sharp, mirrored breath touched her spine. "You're not supposed to be the one," a voice whispered, just before the soil closed softly around her knees.